So LaTisha, it's good to see you, and I know who you are and I know what
Yes.
you're doing, but could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes.
And what's your connection to Scotland?
Yes. My name is LaTisha Gasaway-Paul, and I represent the 4 generations that came before mine at Scotland.
So what motivates you?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question. My great-great-grandfather, William Dove, was a former slave. He purchased 36 acres of land for $210 in 1880. He was actually one of the first former slaves to purchase land in Montgomery County. What's significant about that is because he purchased that 36 acres of land, he purchased at an auction, and others came along and purchased land as well. The Masons came along, the Coopers came along, and by the time my ancestors were done purchasing land in Montgomery County, we owned 500 acres. And unfortunately, we only have 4 acres left.
So how long did that 500 acres left? When did you really start losing the land?
Well, in the 50s and 60s, land was significant value, and luxury homes started popping up all over Scotland. All over Scotland and everywhere had water, sewer, electricity, trash services, all but Scotland. They knew that this land was worth a whole lot of value, but yet they wanted to make sure that we did not have those basic essentials to sustain and live in Scotland. And so the land was valued, but they didn't want the Scotlanders there.
So how did they manage to get rid of most of the land or take most of the land?
Well, by eminent domain, it was a take it or leave it situation. However, Mrs. Siegel,
Yes.
she met Mrs. Mason in 1964. They started Save Our Scotland in 1965, but they needed more progression. They needed to get more involved. They needed more people to help out. So what they did was contact my grandfather, who lived in Scotland. His name was Melvin L. Crawford. They formed Save Our Scotland. My grandfather was the president of the Scotland Community Foundation back then, and they formed Save Our Scotland to save Scotland during that time. You got to remember that when the land was purchased in 1880, the only reason it was allowed to be purchased is because nobody else wanted it. It was too wet and too hilly for farming during that time.
So when did, or how much land was left by the time people started doing Save Our Scotland?
Well, right now today, we only have 4 acres
Right.
left. So the county was taking the land by eminent domain, pretty much saying take it or leave it. This is what you have. So a lot of my ancestors sold off. They did not know the value of the land, but others did, and that's the unfortunate part about that. What they did end up saving Scotland in 1968, we had groundbreaking day. So 100 homes were saved in Scotland, were built by a HUD grant, and that's how Scotland exists today, and that's why we have the 100 homes.
And that's on what, 4 acres now?
Yes, 4 acres left, and that's including the church.
Out of what used to be 500?
It used to be 500.
That's a lot less.
Yes, it is. And that's why we are doing our best to make sure we survive and thrive here at Scotland.
And so did a lot of folks who lived in the original community wind up in the houses over here? Did they wind up being condensed or put closer together as land disappeared?
Well, absolutely. A lot of them did move away, and that's why I'm trying to get a lot to come back home. I'm trying to get some of the land back that was taken away from us to build more homes, to build a community pool. In addition to the 25 homes that we have here, we need to do some reconstruction and make sure that those homes are modified and look like the 75 homes so that we're all uniformed again.
Yeah, there's a difference you can see if people
Significant
get some
difference.
B-roll. We can
Correct.
show people the difference in the community and where the houses were built.
Scotland is one way in and one way out. So when you're driving inside the Scotland community right now, you say, oh, these homes are absolutely gorgeous, and that's great because they need to be modified. But then you go down into the 25 homes and you're like, what happened to these homes? We can't just leave it like that, and we won't. There's work to be done. You know, at one point in time, when they were doing Save Our Scotland, the 25 homes were supposed to be at the beginning of the community. But HUD and others did not want the homes at the beginning of the community. They said that the homes were not going to last, that the families and Doves and Scotlanders were not going to last, the homeowners. So they moved those 25 homes to the back of the community, and we're still here with hopes that they were going to be sold off better.
So even after giving you something, they were actually planning on you not being here.
Correct. So what they did was give us just enough to shut everyone up. We were not supposed to still be here. The homes that you can see, they're deteriorating. We have a lot of work to do, but they gave us just enough.
So what's the status of what you're working on now? What have you done? What are you pushing for next?
A whole lot.
Yeah.
I'm pushing for a whole lot, but it's not just me. I have leaders that's carried the cross long before I came along, and I want to say thank you to them. I have Janet Ross, Chuck Williams, my sisters, TOC, Rebecca Dove, Edgar Dove, his wife Bernice Dove, Miss Evelyn Boston. It's just a long list of those that's carried the torch to say we're going to stand up and stay for Scotland. And even though that there are times that I feel like I'm tired, I can't do any more, my sisters often remind me that I'm built for this, I'm built for the leadership, but I also know that every good leader must first learn to follow. In 2019, the Scotland AME Zion Church, we had a flood. Let me take you back to the history of the Scotland Church. In 1905, Scotland AME Zion Church was founded. In 1915, it became a part of the AME Zion Church. In 1924, my ancestors built the Scotland AME Zion Church, the first part, with their bare hands.
And they built it where? Right over here on?
Correct, off of Seven Locks Road. Now see, here's the thing. When they built the church, the homes that were in back were not there, and Seven Locks Road was not in this condition in the area that it is now. It was behind it. So when they moved Seven Locks Road, if the floodplain water pushed back into the basement, and that's what caused the flood in 2019. And we're doing a whole lot of work to raise these funds. The Second Century Capital Campaign with Scotland AME Zion Church is led by the leadership of Dr. Reverend Evelina Huggins to make sure that we get the money to go back into that church. So that's one project that we're doing to make sure that we're doing that. And then I have the housing project to make sure that we get the 25 homes redone in Scotland. And then I have the Juneteenth, the Scotland Juneteenth Heritage Festival.
Speaking of the Heritage Festival, I mean,
Yeah.
last year's Juneteenth celebration was the biggest
Yes.
Juneteenth celebration in the region. And you have to be really proud of that.
Yes.
And it was really a good thing to see. I mean, given my political bent, I always wondered, how black people approached the 4th of July as, a liberation moment, when it was anything but a liberation moment for the black community. So do you want to talk about the importance of Juneteenth?
Absolutely, because on June 19th, that's our Freedom Day. 250,000 slaves were freed on this day. And we're going to walk, talk, sing, and shout, just like we did last year, but we're going to walk, talk, sing, and shout this year, but with fireworks. Hallelujah, it's Freedom Day. And I just get excited thinking about it. I get excited talking about it because I understand what it took to get to this point. I understand the blood, sweat, and tears, the work, the hard work. I understand that lives were taken to get to this point. I understand the captivity, the shackles that were there. I understand that we are the elders' wildest dreams, and we're not going to fail them by just ignoring all of the hard work that they put in. And that's why we have Juneteenth, and that's why we're going to signify this holiday and respect it for what it is. It is a sacred holiday. And on Juneteenth, Scotland Juneteenth Heritage Festival is going to make sure that we have the biggest celebration all throughout Montgomery County. We start on June 15th at Bethesda Theater. We have Chuck Brown. We call that opening night. On June 16th, we have the Marriott Interfaith Breakfast at the Marriott Hotel. And the interfaith by far is what brings us together. Just like in the 60s when it was Joy Siegel. Just like now when you have Mr. Rails from Glenstone Museum. The interfaith community, there is power in numbers. When we all come together, anything is possible. And that is on the 16th. On the 17th, we have the basketball clinic. On the 18th, we have the football clinic. And on June 19th, it all goes down. We start with prayer virtually at 7 o'clock. We then go over to 5K at 8 o'clock. We have the village that starts at 9 o'clock. We have the carnival at Cabin John Park, and that starts at 1:30. That's the parade. That's from 1:30 to 2:30. And we have all of these festivities going on. We have rides at the Cabin John Park call it the Children's Caribbean Carnival, a day of celebration. And then we also have right in the room that we're sitting in right now, we have the history workshop that talks, and they're going to talk about the history, and not just the history of Scotland, history all over. We have history. There were 8 surviving communities left, Black 8 surviving communities. We want to talk about that. We want to incorporate that. And that's all possible by continuing to make sure that we talk about our history.
So do you want to talk about the history of Juneteenth? Because a lot of people watching this, being that this is American, we kind of lose this part of history.
Correct.
Where did Juneteenth come from?
Well, I'll talk about that, but I got to talk about that after I talk about the fireworks. Because for the first time in the history of Montgomery County, we are shooting fireworks, and it just signifies the importance of the holiday. You mentioned the 4th of July and that being the significance of 4th of July, but that's what Juneteenth is for me. That's what Juneteenth means for African Americans. That's what Juneteenth means for a whole lot of people that understands the significance and the impact that it is, and that's why we're going to glorify on that day. So yes, I would talk about the 250,000 slaves that were freed on June 19th. Emancipation Day.
Yep.
1 year prior, slavery ended, but Galveston, Texas did not get the word. So over 250,000 slaves for 1 year later were still working, they were still slaves, and they got the message that they were free. Slavery should not have even existed in the first place, but to egg on an additional year is disheartening, and we just have to do better. And that's why I like to make sure that I'm in the ear of the county executive, in the ear of the politicians to say, don't just show up for when it's time to vote. I want to make sure that we stay in the course, just like yourself. I want you to get in the field, and you do. And I need you to make sure we're role modeling that for everyone else that's, the election time is this year. We want to make sure that you're in the field. Don't come to just the cookout. Come get on the grill, put on some gloves, wash your hands and put on the gloves, make a plate, serve the food, and that's what we want. You can't help us with the future if you don't know our past. And that's what it is. Like, you have to generally know our past to help us define what betterment looks like for the future. And I don't always want to sit back and talk about me giving a history lesson and say, this is why I matter. This is why my family matter. I want you to automatically know that. I want everyone in the county to automatically know that. It would be nice if this, all over the world, I always tell my sisters this little inside, one day, I'm going to change the national anthem. One day. And I always say, instead of the land of the free, I always say it should be in the home of the brave. I said it should be the land of the free in the home of the fair and brave. Because that's all we want is fairness. That's all we want. We're not looking for anything more. We're not looking for anything less. We want fairness. And that's why I always say it should be for the land of the free and the home of the fair and brave.
They skip a verse of the national anthem.
Yes, they do.
That's kind of uncomfortable verse where they actually talk about slavery and why they have to beat the British.
Exactly.
The other thing is with the emancipation. I mean, when Lincoln issued it,
correct,
he actually gave the southern states 6 months
correct,
to rejoin the Union. And if you rejoined the Union, then your slaves wouldn't be freed. And in the states in the South that the Union actually occupied, they didn't free the slaves.
correct.
Because they were being occupied and they were under Union control.
Well, they didn't. They got the message, but they just chose not to free the slaves, and they still wanted them in control, because we, in this country, we have a very controlling issue that we need to work on. And the people are not your property. You can have a lot of property, you can control a lot of things, but people are not one of them. And for some, that was hard to let go. But then that's why it took a year later for those 250,000 slaves to be freed in Galveston, Texas.
Until they were confronted by a Union general.
Correct.
Which is much more persuasive.
Correct.
So what's going to happen on Juneteenth this year? What are all the other things? I know there's a large number of events occurring.
Yes, there's a large number of events that's going to occur. Like I said, from Chuck Brown down at Bethesda Theater, We have a whole lot of other bands there. We have Jay Summerall that's going to be there as well. And then at the Interfaith Breakfast, and it is the Interfaith Breakfast. Yes, the Scotland Amity Zion Church choir is going to be there to sing, but we also have other denominations and different faiths that's going to be in clergy that's included in on the Interfaith. And you know, the God of every nation praise his name, and we're going to worship together. And that's the one time that we're going to all get to be together and be still in prayer. And that's another thing that I feel like this county is lacking, and that this world is lacking, is just the ability to just be still and appreciate everyone around us. There's a lot of things that's like mental health. I always say on that day, let's talk about mental health and awareness, and those are the conversations that need to come up. In the Interfaith, in the Social Action Pavilion, that's why I'm bringing this up, they bring in all of those things.
It's important. I mean, there is a lot of damage to undo.
A lot of damage.
And it doesn't get undone simply by celebrations. It actually requires work to
and,
undo a lot of this.
And here's the thing. We have time. We don't have much time, but we want to put an emphasis on righting some of those wrongs, and that's what we're trying to do. And that's the importance of, don't sweep it under the carpet that like they didn't happen. We know that you might not have been here, but they did happen, and we're just looking for fairness of, and I think that's the question. What does fairness look like for all? I know what it looks like for me, but what does that look like for all? That's why you have some people with reparations, and like I said, with my 25 homes and with the land, those are the things that's important. And on June 19th, we go over to the Cabin John Park, where the Children's Caribbean Carnival is, because Cabin John Park was once my land. So on that day, to be able to be, you know, inclusive and just be there and say, you know what, on this day, I'm going to take advantage of it, and I'm going to celebrate, and I'm going to take in once was mine, and I'm going to bring in people all around me, and we're going to celebrate together. Again, we can't take back things that happened in the past, but we're here now, and I want to bring awareness to that, and Cabin John Park has brought awareness to that. They've been great partners as well.
You had that map at one of your events of what used to be Scotland, and we were sitting in a nice restaurant. Yes. And I'm thinking about all this incredibly valuable land that used to belong to this community and found its way somewhere else.
Correct.
And just imagine what would have happened to people here if that wealth had transferred to them as opposed to someone else.
I'm talking billions. Cabin John Village. Montgomery County is one of the richest counties in the state of Maryland. So can you imagine the worth of, if our homes were still here and our land, the land itself, what it would be worth right now? And I want some of it back. I do. I want some of it back, and I just think it's because it's the right thing to do. I don't know how we're going to do that, but I'm sure with the right leaders in the politics that we can make that happen.
So how do, you know, people in the community help you all? What can people in Montgomery County do to help you with the issues you're trying to make right? You know, what are the most important things you feel you could use support for?
Yeah. First, start with knowledge. First, start with knowledge and knowing the history of Scotland and how it plays a role in Montgomery County. Like I said, my great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, William Dove, was one of the first to purchase land in Montgomery County. That alone is historic, but a lot of people don't know that. They think that we're being invited to the table, when the actuality is, no, we've been here. You come have a seat, pull up a chair if you want to, but I'm not leaving what's already mine. And that's the important part of it. In Scotland, Scotland community, Scotland Amity Zion Church, we understand that the significance of it. It's important and impactful. When the flood came, there were some people that had the gall to say that we should leave and go somewhere else. Why put $11 million into that church? Because I have souls that have gone before me in that church, and I'm not ready to part away with them. We were there first. Scotland Amity Zion Church, it sits on 3 plots of land. I'm not sure if you knew that or not. But those 3 plots of land, one was Leroy Dove, Sarah Sims, who was born into slavery and actually given her land by a former enslaver, and then my grandfather, great-grandfather, James Peter Dove. And they signed that land over to Scotland Amity Zion Church for that church to sit on that land. So again, that's just history on history of why we're not leaving. We're going to fight, just like my ancestors did, that built the bridge for us to walk on, and that's why we are resilient the way that we are today. I've seen the work that's been done. The center that we're sitting in right now, and it's named after Betty Carroll Thompson. I attended the Action in Montgomery meetings with her. I'm a witness, a testimony to what hard work looks like. My cousin Barbara, she used to balance the books at church. She attended meeting on meetings on meetings. I was there and watched our testimony. Okay, there's just so many people that I've seen put in the work to make sure for us to be where we are today, and we're not just going to give up on the work that they put in. We're not.
And of course, Joyce Siegel. You know, I knew her late after this had happened, but she was worked in the county, and she was one of the strongest housing advocates we ever had. And I thought that, you know, it was really fitting that she was involved in this, and I know she's come to a number of the celebrations, and it's always good to see her when she's there.
Mrs. Siegel did not have to help us. She did not have any obligation to help us. She did not have any relationship with us, but she stepped out on a limb. She stepped up and stepped out and said, I'm going to do something about that. That is what heroism looks like. That is a hero. She stepped up and she got others involved. If more people stepped up and did the right thing like Mrs. Siegel did, then this world would be a better place.
She did a good job of making people nervous.
She did. She did. And just like Cousin Betty, she was a thorn in their side. I remember when Mr. Ike Leggett said that at her funeral that she was a thorn in his side. I remember that, and I said, yes, I remember those meetings. She was a gentle thorn, but she pricked until she got exactly what she needed.
But I think it's important to do that. I mean, things don't just change because you ask for them.
Well,
sometimes you got to say why this is important, and I'm not going to go away.
Correct. And with Mrs. Siegel, I sit down and I talk to her. Like I said, she's my bonus grandmother. She's my bonus grandmother. I sit and I talk to her. She tells me the stories over and over. She tells me the stories about Mrs. Mason. She tells me the stories about my grandfather, Melvin Crawford. She tells me the stories about the other Scotlanders, the interfaith community, and how they all stepped up and they had to, had picket signs, and they had to go out and had to knock, and they had to get signs, and they had to get signatures to make progress, to get the homes built on the land, because some people just wasn't that willing, and some people were afraid. And you had this white woman coming in and they didn't know what to think of it. But she also did a great job building relationships, saying, I can trust her. And that's what Miss Siegel's mean to me. When I think of Miss Siegel, I think of trust. And trust is earned, not given. And she did a great job with that.
Yeah, she's a remarkable woman.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
Anything else you think people should know about Scotland or about you?
With myself, I'm not going anywhere. There's a reason that I'm here. Scotland is sacred, and I am going to make sure I continue to preserve Scotland. I'm going to make sure that we celebrate the achievements that Scotlanders have. And with my ancestors, I watched them. I watched Eddie Dove. I watched Rebecca Dove, Evelyn Boston. And I just know that it's worth fighting for. And we just have so much history here. And I want everyone to understand the history of Scotland. And like I said, that comes from knowledge. And to know is to know. And
you're a teacher?
I'm a teacher. I'm here for it.
Good.
Thank you.
Look, I appreciate you doing this with me today. I appreciate the work you do. I mean, it's really nice to see the persistence.
Yes.
And the determination.
Yes.
I think it's important. I think you're a good model.
Thank you.
For other people.
I try to be. I've had great role models that come before me. And, my Uncle Skip, Melvin Crawford Jr., we sit down and we talk about stories all the time. Now, he doesn't get out much to go talk, but when he does talk, you can't help but to listen. We talk about the 8 remaining black communities in Montgomery County. There were 80. We talked about at one time that there were only 3 schools that black children were able to go to. Do you know,
Yep.
I know you know how big Montgomery County
Yeah.
is, how big Montgomery County is, and they were only allowed to go to 3 schools. Carver High School, you know, Lincoln.
Lincoln.
Yes.
So we're putting money into Lincoln to bring it back as
Good.
a community facility.
Good.
Because that's important. We've,
Yes.
folks have uncovered another graveyard that was kind of dismantled up in the Up County, and
Yes.
that's coming back again. And those kind of things are important to history. People have a right to recover
It
their
is.
history and tell the story
Yeah.
about who lived here.
Correct.
I think about. I didn't grow up in Montgomery County. I grew up in D.C. till I was 10 years old, and then came out here. And I think about 160 years ago, almost everything was covered with plantations. You would never know that today.
Yeah.
Don't talk
Yeah.
about it. Don't see it.
That's it.
It's just like it must have been this way all the time.
Correct. All the time.
And it wasn't this way all the time. And I think it's important
And it needs
for
to be
people to
fixed.
understand that.
Correct. And speaking of plantations, I'll be honest with you. I'm 45 years old. I just found out last year about the Sandy Springs Slave Museum. That was disheartening that I was just now learning about that, but I was able to get in contact with Miss Sandy Williams. She's one of the directors over there. And those are just some of the stories that need to be told. Miss Carolyn Taylor from Emory Grove.
Yep.
Those are the people I look up to. Those are the people that we formed this alliance group that we're going to work together. And that's why we are the kinship community.
So have you linked up with the 8 remaining communities?
Of course I have. Of course I have. Yes, we had dinner. Last week we had dinner.
Wow.
Not a representative from all the communities were there, but we had Emory Grove there. We had Sandy Spring there, and obviously Scotland. And it was just a good feeling, and we're moving forward. I've been in contact with Miss Anita Powell from Lincoln Park, and those are some of the moves that we're trying to make. It's important as kinship communities to be together. We're stronger in numbers. There's strength and power. And I have linked up with the communities. I've been in contact with them, whether by phone or email, and we have a lot of work to do. But like I said, when I found out about the Sandy Springs Slave Museum last year, I was like, no way. There's no way that I'm just now knowing about this. We want to get this information into the public school system. We want to make sure that our stories are told, but we want the county to help, but we don't want the county to come and take over. And I think that's where the resistance is of really sharing the information. There's a fine line between helping and overstepping, and a lot of times that there's problems there because people don't know how to decipher the two, right? And because we need your help. And what does help look like? Help looks like by coming to volunteer, by putting Sandy Spring out there, by putting Scotland out there, say, hey, know about this place, go visit. Scotland, know about the history of Scotland. We have people that live in Potomac, ride up and down 7 Locks Road, and do not know about the Scotland community. Not at all. And they say, oh gosh, my house was it was a part of the land that was owned by William Dove, or Sarah Sims, or the Masons, or the Coopers.
Yep.
We have to do better.
We do need to do better. I mean, there are some, people like Anita,
Yes.
Tina Benjamin, Warren Fleming, Harvey Ziegler before he died, who played an important role in trying to maintain, revive the history of the community.
Yeah.
And that's the Emory Grove project. The
Correct.
housing that's going to get built up there is really significant. That's an example of urban removal where, for the good of everybody, they knocked down their houses
Correct.
and built something nicer for other people. And it's nice that we're actually going back up there now.
Correct.
And trying to write that. But I think, to your point, people need help.
Yes, they do.
But people are perfectly
they
capable
do.
with help of
They do.
managing their own affairs.
Correct.
But the help is a necessary thing to offset some of the things that that you don't have access to. So I'm always look at what we try to do is be helpful.
Correct.
But this is your community and your history, and it ought to be determined by the people who've lived it and experienced it.
That's it.
I can ask you what do you need.
That's
I shouldn't tell you what you need to do.
That part. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And with a clear mind to come in, one, to want to listen, to want to help, but to two, actually listen. And that's where it is are you coming in here for the views, the likes, the mentions, or are you coming in here to actually be authentic and help? And that's where it is. And I'm pretty good reader. I'm pretty good at, knowing who's going to come in and help. And if I see somebody that's going to use me, I'm going to tell you now, you're going to get an earful, because I'm not, no, that's not what we're doing. And I'm a protector of people, and I want to make sure I help them maintain their peace along the way. And that's also important to me. That's very much so. That's very important.
It's important to the community.
Yes, it is. Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing this with me today.
Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you, County Executive.